that was like the start of the hard part for me because I was pre-med and I did a poetry writing workshop with a poet named Lucy Brock-Broido. And she was really encouraging. And then I went home and I basically had to like come out to my parents.
Yeah.
And it was like
Out of the poetry closet.
Yeah, it was a big deal for them. I remember like the kitchen at night, we're around the table and my mom crying and, saying, you're going to become one of those people who rides a bicycle around with elbow patches on their jacket.
Wait, that's like the goal, right?
I know, and I was like, yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah.
But
Right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sad Me of the Past, where we invite an established writer to revisit a piece they wrote in their tender years. That piece may fill them with affection, regret, nostalgia, embarrassment, relief, delight, anguish, all of the above, or something else entirely. Every infant must take those early, brave, awkward steps when learning to walk. We writers must make our own early, brave, awkward efforts as we set out to master our craft. So let's travel back to that ancient time when we were bursting with hubris or scared to death, drunk with language or paralyzed by it, determined to become a writer or terrified that we didn't have the stuff. I'll show them, we thought. But what did we show, really, and to whom? Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sad Me of the Past. I'm Stephen Lovely, director of the Iowa Young Writers Studio.
And I'm Lauren Haldeman, the senior editor at the Writing University.
And I'm Danny Kalachi, director of the Magid Center for Writing here at the University of Iowa. And listeners, today we're going to finally answer the question everyone has been asking, what's in the box? To help us get there, we are joined in studio by poet, editor, human extraordinaire, the one and only Srikanth Reddy. Reddy is the author of 3 books of poetry, including Facts for Visitors, Voyager, and Underworld Lit, which was a finalist for the Griffin International Poetry Prize, a book of criticism, and a brand new book of lectures entitled The Unsignificant, 3 Talks on Poetry and Pictures. Reddy is a graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop, the recipient of honors from the Guggenheim Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts, among others, and he currently serves as the poetry editor for the Paris Review and the series editor for the University of Chicago Press's Phoenix Poets series. Now, about that box. Maybe all poets wonder how it's done, how a true master craftsman makes a thing so solid and vast it both contains the possibility to hold the quite real, never-ending universe of emotion and thought, while also maintaining the structural fortitude to ensure all that possibility can itself withhold the weight it seems to need to carry. Maybe it's not just poets. Maybe it's the readers of poetry, those merry few believers, who view the box they find in their hands and say to themselves, my God, look at this stunning sundial. Time is a mouth, a function of the glorious unknown. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not all poets or readers. I'm just one poetry reader who, since I first had the luxury of reading the work of Srikanth Reddy over 20 years ago, has asked myself time and again, not how he builds his poems, those unmatched language frames, but rather what tools and tricks he doesn't deploy to steal my heart anew. Listener, if there's a more precise, vetted architect of electric verse, I don't know of them. Reddy writes with heart and ear, with formal air and care, and also careful abandon. From collapsed villanelles to repaste erasures, Srikanth Reddy is a poet who doesn't build boxes as much as he builds their objective correlative. Lines and stanzas, sequences and books, giving any reader lucky enough to hold these words the chance to realize it was never what was in the box that mattered. It wasn't even a box. It was the knowledge that someone could make us feel the box, need the box, want the box, all of that and more the box, that guides this reader to the claim that Srikanth Reddy is a master of the craft with a heart of gold to boot. It is with honor and joy that we welcome today to Sad Me of the Past, the man of my dreams, Srikanth Reddy.
Welcome, Srikanth.
Well
Hey,
done,
guys.
Danny. Got time as a mouth in there.
I wanted to make you laugh, Lauren.
What's that from?
Oh, he made it up,
Yeah.
but we use it as an inside joke. It's actually a pretty good line of poetry.
It is.
Yeah, guys, I'm not just a podcast host.
We
How many
can't
times do I have to
forget.
tell you
So
that?
much more. Yeah.
Chiku, welcome. Welcome back to Iowa City. Welcome home. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm I'm hoping that, Lauren, you can edit out the sound of me, my mouth swallowing
On it.
time and
I've already had so much
saliva.
practice with Stephen.
Good at
Stephen
that.
has
Yeah.
really
Training
bad mouth
her,
sounds.
yeah,
So.
I do.
Yeah,
That's why,
yeah.
you know,
Good
when I'm
at it
not
now.
talking, I back up.
Okay.
Yeah.
My daughter once told me that when I chew, and it sounds like a horse.
I believe her.
So, Lauren, you want to tell Chiku a little bit about this podcast?
All right. So I came up with this podcast a long time ago and tried to recruit many different people to do it with me.
And she got to the bottom of the list.
These two schlubs finally said yes. The idea was, like I was telling you, I went through a box of my own writing and I found, not only did I find like an embarrassment of embarrassments
Yeah.
and riches,
Yeah.
but I also had like an emotional journey.
Yeah.
And I thought it'd be really cool to see like other writers who I respect and admire and love, were they writing this bad of stuff in elementary school? And it'd be nice for younger writers to see, like, look, you do get better. No one comes out writing amazingly. Unfortunately,
I think what we've learned is like, yes,
everyone that comes on brings their supposed
we're
bad
still waiting for
work.
someone who
Yeah.
doesn't
And
write
it's
well
all
at the age of
amazing.
16. Yeah.
And so I've just had to let that concept of that show go.
Yeah.
And now we're fascinated in seeing what we've noticed is a lot of times what you were writing when you were a kid is what you're writing now. And the same things that you were grappling with.
Yeah.
You're grappling now. And I think Josh Parkinson said it really well. He was like, I had to go way out to come back to the thing I was trying to do at 7, you know?
But we're not forcing you into an arc, Chiku. You don't have to,
Yeah.
you know.
You don't have to follow
If your
that.
story is different, don't feel like you have to conform to Lauren's,
Yeah.
Well, I'm remembering
Your art
like
can
now I'm
spin
like, oh
around.
man, I should have brought my my first poem, which does exist somewhere, and it's illustrated.
Can you
and-
recite it?
I can tell you what it's an acrostic,
Great.
Nice.
and it's and so I can recite it from the first letter going down, and it's just 2 words: Abraham Lincoln.
Oh,
Wait, that's
mean, it's a
you're
start.
spelling those out.
yeah.
Yeah,
So do you remember? So do you remember?
the whole what the poem
Do
did.
you remember? So where do you remember where you were and what you?
Yeah.
Like what? What was the context?
Yeah. So it was like probably like 4th grade or something. And I was really into Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
He was like the superhero,
Yeah.
like, because I grew up in Chicago. There's a super cult of Abraham Lincoln in the state of Illinois in the public education system. I was like learning about, his whole life story. He was tall, he was strong, he freed the slaves,
Pretty good hero.
yeah. And so like we had an assignment to do an acrostic poem, and I'm like, well, obviously Abraham Lincoln that's where I'm going.
I mean,
The root of all
everyone's
poetry.
gonna do it.
Yeah, and I don't remember what all I remember is that they were individual words. So it was just like the first like line was like awesome, and the next one was like brave.
I have it written up here. I've set up the acrostic.
Yeah.
Rad.
Yeah.
So it was just like descriptive words.
Just positive adjectives associated with Abraham Lincoln, and there was a drawing. There's a drawing of him with this top hat smiling out at you.
If you can find that, I'd love to get a picture of
I'll
that.
try and dig it
Okay.
up. Yeah,
Do you remember who was the teacher who gave you this 4th grade acrostic poem assignment?
it must have been. Yeah, it must have been Miss Caden, and I don't remember much about the context, but that's my first political poem.
Yeah.
I really stuck my neck out.
What a stance to take too.
And I'd like to
Pro Lincoln.
pro Lincoln. I'd like to take it all the way back then, because you just mentioned not only Abraham Lincoln, but you also mentioned you grew up in Chicago.
Yeah.
So let's start there.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
so you're
Born
in
and
Chicago,
raised.
Windy
born and
City.
raised, And at what point, is it before this fourth grade assignment or is it after this fourth grade assignment, do you start gravitating towards writing, reading, literature? Was it something that you just always had kind of an interest in, or do you remember when it sort of became a thing for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I really came to writing poetry till later. Like I have like the school assignment of doing a haiku, and I think I probably enjoyed it as much as the next kid. But
Was it Abraham Lincoln?
haiku?
Yeah.
No, I think there was like one about like flying a kite in the wind. It's
Can this be your next
usual.
book, though? This
Just one Abraham, except like expanded, like
Yes.
exploded view of Abraham Lincoln. Yeah.
Sorry,
Great title for the book, too. Exploded View of Abraham.
But I was like totally immersed in reading because both my parents worked full-time jobs. They were physicians. They just immigrated from India, and so they were like at work, and they didn't have like great. They had the kind of crappy details that like the American-born doctors didn't have. In fact, my mom had trained as a OB-GYN in India, and she was catching babies in a town in India called Tirupati, and that was her dream job. She really loved it. And then when they came to the U.S., there weren't jobs like that for her, so she had to switch and retrain, and she became a radiation oncologist. Working in a Veterans Administration hospital. Wow. So basically from catching babies to
the opposite.
Yeah, ushering Korean War veterans, on their way out. Like people who'd been exposed to Agent Orange and, so they were like working all the time. And I and my sister were on our own, and so we get dropped off at daycare early or dropped off at school early. And we were latchkey kids and would come home, and there would be hours before they came home. And so I read a lot because I wasn't like super sporty kid. And, I think my mom says I learned how to read from watching I watched a lot of TV too. Mm-hmm. And and I guess I learned to read from watching Sesame Street and was reading, just like all the time. So that's kind of where literary language kind of opened up, because I remember this kind of like golden age of like school books, and there were these. I would get dropped off at this daycare. Actually, it was our first school. Kindergarten was a Lutheran school where the only things you could do were, plunk out like "Jesus Loves Me" on the piano. Or read Bible stories, Bible comics and stuff.
Do you remember what were some of the things that you read that you remember really being meaningful to you? Can you remember that early, or was there anything in particular that stands out?
Yeah. I would read like so one thing about this kindergarten was they went up through the different grades, and so they had like textbooks. They were called like golden stories or something like that. It was like textbooks of different stories for different grades. And so I just like would work my way through these books before school, because we would have like a whole hour and there would be and the teacher didn't want to deal with us. So I remember then like after that, reading, like there were this series that I don't know, when you guys were little, was there a series called Great Books?
Yeah, there was, and it had like, I remember the letters were blue. This is, didn't it have like this? It said "Great Books" like stamped on the cover of each of the different covers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and they weren't books; they were just short stories.
Right.
Okay.
But they're classics.
And they were like paperback, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like cheaply made.
And there would be stories by like Maupassant or like Robert Louis Stevenson. So I still remember a story called "The Most Dangerous Game."
Oh yeah,
Do you remember that
I
one?
think I do.
Oh, that story's horrifying. Don't they hunt a human
Yeah.
on an island?
Yeah.
They made a movie out of it.
And like, that was pure fiction back then, but I don't know.
There's definitely reality TV.
Okay.
the thing about like that story or like Ray Bradbury stories that were in those collections, where there was a lot of scary stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember those collections too. There
Yeah.
were a lot of like dramatic nature.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one about people being overrun by ants, Leninger and the ants or something. And then there was Jack London's, there was one about him freezing to death.
How to start a fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Remember
and I'm
he-
just like,
To
I remember
start a
having an
fire, yeah.
anthology with all these stories and just being like, God, are these like, this is what they give kids first? Like to read?
Yeah, but
you know?
it was an amazing like theater of the imagination, and it was like there was nothing that could compare to like The Most Dangerous Game, where this guy is shipwrecked on an island and he sees this castle and he seeks shelter and he's welcomed in by this magnanimous host, and then learns that he's going to be hunted that night. And spoiler alert, at the end of that story, the hunter becomes the hunted, and and it ends with like an open-ended, like you don't know who's going to be the prey, and that.
Did you? It comes up a lot too. Did you ever read like Reader's Digest or?
Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
And those stories were scary too.
Yeah, they were scary, and then there was like sex stuff in Reader's
Oh, yeah,
Digest
there
too.
Really?
Like sex advice and things, and it's
Like,
like
I shouldn't be reading
I don't
this.
remember
Yeah.
that. How did I miss that? Yeah.
Stephen, maybe your parents tore the sex.
I was reading. Maybe I was reading too much Humor in Uniform.
I forgot about that.
So how did you? So did you ever write fiction? Like, did you ever have an instinct to write?
I don't
prose,
think
or-
so. I had like all of you, I'm sure, like total inexhaustible appetite and hunger for narrative. But I did, and anything, I did write. I did actually. Now that I think about it, I actually did write quite a few stories, and would bind them. And I don't think I saw your little copyright on The Lost Island. What was it called again?
It was called The Lost Island, yeah, and I copyrighted it, by just drawing a C and then a circle around it. That's
Yeah,
what I copyrighted.
with a little teddy bear next to the
Yeah,
C.
yeah, I was going to start my own, I don't know, teddy bear copywriting agency. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But
But like it's like that. Like when I saw that, I felt like I knew where you were. Because like also there was a name for the publishing company, Troll Books.
no, I was starting an empire, you guys.
Yeah.
You got to do it all yourself these days.
You do when you're a kid.
But so Chiku, so you're reading a bunch. Your parents are working. You're
Yeah.
watching TV, and you got a sibling at home. And as you're kind of making your way through elementary school, were you like reading at night and your parents couldn't take your books away, or were you really only kind of doing it when you had nothing else to do? And how did that then start to intersect with what you were doing, either academically or just in your spare time? Like, did you start to see these things focus in a space where you were like, I want to do this for my life?
Yeah. So I was reading all through the summers, riding my bike, going to the public library, just staying in the library all day. And then, and that was all through like grade school. And then, high school got kind of more social and, started sitting on the bench at basketball games. And, I think I did feel like I wanted to have writing at the center of what I did, because I felt like that was the thing that had nourished me for a long time. And, a lot of it was also growing up as like a South Asian kid in a totally like white Irish Catholic kind of suburb of Chicago, once we moved to the suburbs after I was 6. And being a little embarrassed that my mom and dad didn't speak English perfectly, and childishly blaming them for not fully mastering another
whole other
totally
language,
foreign
yes.
language while they were also becoming physicians. And so like really having a mastery of English was like something I like fixated on. So like spelling bees were like a big deal.
Oh, I bet you were good at them.
I was really good at spelling bees.
I knew
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. In fact, it got to the point where I remember I threw a spelling bee
What?
in 8th grade.
Really?
Why?
Yeah.
What's
Were you being paid?
how did that come
It was
about?
just like I was like in the middle of like that was the one thing I could always win at, and I like lost it so much else, on a regular basis. I just started to feel really deeply. I remember feeling in the middle of the spelling bee, being like embarrassed because like no one else wanted to be in the spelling bee, but everyone had to be in the spelling bee every year, and feeling like, I've won a lot of these spelling bees. I'm going to win this one. So, but I had to make it look realistic, so I couldn't misspell like
What was the word?
butter, I couldn't misspell an
Yeah.
easy word.
Yeah, yeah.
So I had to wait until I got a word that I could maybe realistically not spell. Wow. And it was shepherd.
Oh,
That's a hard one.
yeah,
I
that's a
can't
hard
spell
one.
it right now.
See, that sounds stressful just waiting for the
Are there
word.
two
you know?
H's in it?
No, it's H-A-R-D. Is that right?
Does it start?
No,
Nice.
H-E-R-D. Sorry. I'm a bad speller.
And he's not even trying.
I'm so nervous
Yeah, right.
about saying the wrong thing.
I'm not.
Wait,
yeah.
but was this out of like empathy for the other students that you?
Yeah.
It was not wanting to be the nerd,
Yeah, I see, I see.
and that's also a cultural thing. Like,
Yes.
look at who wins the spelling
Yeah, for
bees. It's always the South Asian kid.
So you were
Yeah.
trying to throw it for some popularity or to shore
To
up
be
a
less
different
unpopular.
I get it, yeah.
I
Did
see.
you have like did you like turn on your acting chops? Like, were you like
It's like,
pretending?
oh man,
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
It's
pretending?
like SHEPPERD, and then like the look on Mr. Bolton's face was like, oh my god.
Do you think
so
he knew?
disappointed. Yeah.
I don't know actually. He might have known. And like it's like, another Asian kid won. So like,
Okay.
But it wasn't you, at least.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me.
Thank
So then like
God.
someone else got to be king of the spelling nerds.
Right, right.
But
That's
so
an
but so
amazing
you were
story, yeah.
you were reading so much, and you're saying that you also like you knew writing was something you wanted to connect to your world. When did you move from this passion for reading into trying your own hand
Hmm.
at writing?
Yeah. So I would like write like stories, as a kid, and then for a little while in grade school I would write stories, and my teacher would, I think just to kill time, have me read them. And they were always funny stories, and they were funny stories that had like character, like people from the school in them, and something zany happened, and so that became like a class time filler. And I'm just remembering now because I hadn't thought about this for a long time, but so I was always like aware that like writing was something like that would get people's attention, and that being creative with it was something that was kind of fun. But I think I wanted to be a journalist in high school. I was reading, like columnists in the Chicago Tribune. I remember there's a guy named Mike Royko who I thought was. You remember? Yeah,
of course.
Are you from Chicago as well?
No, but I have spent some time there, and I know Mike Roy. I think he was syndicated nationally.
Yeah, I think
So
he
a
was
lot of people
too.
read
Yeah,
him.
yeah. So I thought like, okay, maybe I'll be, and we were talking earlier, I started writing movie reviews when I was in high school for the Tribune, because they had this little thing they did for a couple of years where they had a panel of high school movie critics
Cool.
that was like awesome. It's just like I peaked in like junior year of high school.
Do you remember some
We
of
all
the
kinda
movies you
did.
reviewed?
Oh yeah. We were just talking before
Okay, yeah.
about because I could get out of school to go downtown,
Oh.
and so there was a radio station called WGCI that was like a black radio station in Chicago in the 90s and 80s, and they would have a premiere, and if you're a GCI listener, you could win tickets to go to the premiere of Predator 2. And then I would, get permission to leave high school and pick up my friend Mark Body, who did not have permission to leave his school. And we would go downtown and we'd watch the premiere of Predator 2, in a South Side movie theater. And then I would write some smug
Acrostic.
Yeah.
Right.
Ode to Danny Glover.
Roy Cohen sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
You were allowed to watch Predator 2?
Yeah, I guess I was not really old enough to. Was it like 18 for R-rated movies?
I don't
then?
know.
Well, it
I
would have
still
been
haven't seen it.
17, but I don't. Yeah, it sounds like
Yeah.
you found a way in. You know.
Yeah, because like I had the press pass. I had like a Chicago
So
Tribune
cool.
press pass, and I would go in to the we didn't have email, so I would have to go into the Tribune Tower to file my copy. And I remember once, Gene Siskel, who's a great film critic at the Tribune at the time, I got in an elevator with him.
No way.
Yeah,
Wow.
and he hated the teen critics because we were taking like
coming up.
space,
Yeah.
The
from
youngsters are
him.
coming up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Putting the pressure on him.
It's
So
true.
he did not, he acted as if he didn't know me.
Oh, but he was scared.
Yeah,
terrified.
You were like, I threw a spelling bee,
Yeah.
buddy.
Mhm, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see his
Fear.
the fear in his face.
I can't remember if we actually talked about this on the podcast, but another one of our former guests, Vinny Wilhelm, when he was growing up, he would go see all these movies that he shouldn't have been seeing.
Oh.
And he asked his parents at some point a similar thing, like, why? How did you let me go to those movies? And his dad had thought the rating scale stood for, G, P, G, R, that it was good,
Yeah. Pretty
pretty
good.
good, really good.
Really good.
Which is
X would be extremely good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
which
Like
isn't
the
wrong.
Criterion collection is R.
Yeah. It's so interesting because at this point, it seems to like I would never have guessed that you would go on to be a poet. Like it just seems like you're really prose oriented. You're writing journalism and reviews
Yeah.
but I see like
What
some
happened?
poems in front of you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Were you-
yeah.
Where'd you
were
go
re-
wrong?
Were you reading poetry? at this
So
point, or-
not for pleasure, really.
Okay.
I had an amazing high school teacher. We all probably did, right?
Yes.
It's amazing how often there is some person
Yeah,
who's like
yeah,
a turning.
yeah.
Yeah.
Tom Carey, freshman year of high school, Hinsdale Central, and it was a advanced English class, and he wasn't like Robin Williams in Dead Poet Society. He was like kind of more of a cranky pants, but he had us reading Wallace Stevens.
Wow.
In high school.
Yeah, like early Wallace Stevens from Harmonium. Chief Ascan, if you can, of Caftan and Henna with Heckle's Halt. Like I remember like reading that as a freshman in high school and being like, whoa. So that was, and there's one poem called Disillusionment of 10 O'Clock, Stevens' poem, that I remember made me realize that poetry was something that was just something that I had never encountered before.
What was it that that really struck you? Was it the sound, or was it
That
rhythm, or was it musical? Or
yeah.
just everything, or
It was actually the imagination of it. Disillusionment of 10 O'Clock is a short Stevens poem it's just a list of nightwear that people are not wearing. So, it's like no one is wearing green pajamas with purple stockings, and then there's a list of just the different colors that people are not wearing to bed. And then at the end, it says, only here and there, a sailor, I think it's an old sailor, drunk in his boots, dreams of catching tigers in red weather.
Red weather.
yeah.
Stevens,
I can
yeah.
see. I can see why you would.
Yeah, and then I was like, and of course, when you're that age, it's like, oh yeah, like conform.
My life is red weather.
Yeah. And I'm also like terrified of wearing like pajamas with green sparkles on them and stuff, but I probably do on some level too.
But it makes a lot of sense hearing you kind of talk about that narrative of your experience, where specifically as poetry relates to, you're talking, Stephen, about sound, but also just about the command of the language. And so when you see someone using language in a way that's both imaginative and also hyper-specific, I could imagine a young Chiku who's so interested in the language and seeing something that's both fresh and new, and also this thing you've been staring at forever to try to give yourself the confidence to say, I've mastered this. Here's someone who's kind of using that in an artistic way.
Yeah, yeah. And also it's like I've been like humble bragging about, reading and spelling and stuff, but I think that was a big reaction formation to feeling like a real sense of unbelonging. And so I could try and write a movie review, I could try and write a story. Those are all ways of trying to find some way of belonging and some way of being like seen. When the teacher's like, okay, Chica, will you read Chica's my nickname, right? Chica, will you read your little funny story and make the class laugh, and so I don't have to actually teach this, or will you do the spelling bee or whatever. I think with Stevens, I felt like I saw someone expressing unbelonging
Yeah.
and the weirdness in language that was not narrative. It wasn't like being used for anything. It was just like a place where I felt like, oh, there's someone out there and I can be close with them.
It's like a cipher and a puzzle suddenly, that poetry. I mean, you were so intensely focused on the language and the perfection of the language, and then to run into that where someone's using the language to actually like create obscurity.
Yeah. It wasn't like instrumentalizing language.
Right.
It wasn't using language to win a spelling bee or to write a movie review. It was just the pure pleasure and discovery of it. And so that was that was pretty mind-blowing. I didn't start trying to write poems yet, but I was getting interested in them.
Do you remember who else you went on to read after sort of that? Like, any particular poets who you sort of started reading or gravitating towards, or stuff?
Yeah, we read Whitman, and that was amazing. But I don't think I was pulling down poetry collections or really thinking about writing poetry in a real way. I was still kind of maybe messing around with some like stories, but it was always for like a high school contest. It wasn't like I was like feeling myself as a writer yet. And then it was college when I fell in love for the first time my freshman year, and was like, okay, I've got to write a poem. This is like the one way I can maybe get a leg up on the competition.
I can't
with
throw the
this
spelling bee to her, so I'll have
spelling
to
bee
write
is
a
not
poem.
going to be that
Right,
impressive,
right.
On the
really.
bench in basketball.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you're
so writing bad sonnets.
Do you remember that poem?
That does not exist anymore, I'm sure. But I remember, there being eyelashes in it.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Good decision.
Rhymed, meter, kind of loose.
Yeah.
Did you? So you're talking
Time.
about time.
Hours stolen. Yeah.
So you're in high school. You're starting to read poetry, and then you go to college. So somewhere between leaving high school and going to college, you start writing poems in college. So what did you initially go to school for? Were you there thinking I'm going to major in English and literature or journalism, or were you like, I'm going to be a doctor?
I was like, Mom and Dad, I'm going to be a doctor. And so I was like the first, I guess, member of my family, to be born in the U.S., and they worked their asses off to, make that happen. And then I went to Harvard, and they're like, you're going to be an anesthesiologist.
The best kind of doctor.
It's not enough just to get into Harvard. You got to. You think that would be enough? Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
But, it was like they were, for them, like getting stability, and for them, like bringing their family over, to America was a large part of their lives. And they were like, okay, you made it. Now you're there. The hard part's over. But that was like the start of the hard part for me, because I was pre-med, and I was also taking lots of English classes, and I did a poetry writing workshop with a poet named Lucy Brock-Broido that was just blew my mind. And she was really encouraging. And then I went home, and I think I was doing like summer school, trying to do chemistry to get my pre-med requirements out. And bombing it and just horsing around and going to the film studies center and watching movies and documentaries and reading poetry. And I basically had to like come out to my parents.
Yeah.
And it was like
Out of the poetry closet.
So it wasn't a gradual sort of thing. Was there actually kind of a moment where you were like, hey, this is what I want to do, and then it all hit the fan? Or
Yeah.
how did it go?
Yeah.
That sounds terrifying to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big deal for them. I remember like the kitchen at night, we're around the table and my mom crying and, saying, you're going to become one of those people who rides a bicycle around with elbow patches on their jacket.
Wait, that's like the goal, right?
I know, and I was
Oh,
like, yeah, that's the
yes.
idea. But
All right.
Elbow patches.
No.
It's
Yeah.
interesting. When I went to Madison, as you know, Chico,
Yeah.
and when I went to school, I started as a business major.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
No.
And when I
Still trying to
shifted
process.
over to English and creative writing, I remember a similar thing I told my parents and my grandfather.
Your grandfather
yeah.
too?
And because he was at the time, my family owned a business, a clothing store,
Yeah.
and I think there was this idea that I would like come back and run the business.
3 generations
Yep,
of
yep. It was all on my shoulders.
Yeah.
But when I told them that I was going to move to English and creative writing, they were really supportive, which I'm really grateful for. But I think that part of it was they thought like, oh, he'll go to law school. And so I was like, I definitely will. And that bought me time. But so in your experience, were you like, I'm going to be a poet and I'm going to go get an MFA and I'm going to write books? Or were you just like, I'm going to major in English and creative writing? Like what did you kind of tell them?
Yeah. I told them that I wanted to become a professor.
Okay, that's where the elbow patches come
Yeah,
from.
yeah. And I was kind of lying because but I think I kind of wanted
That
to.
was smart, yeah.
I wanted the elbow patches. I wanted I wanted the bike. I didn't want to be like an unemployed poet, So I was like, I can become a professor. I have professors who teach this, and you wait and see. I can do it. And my dad was like he was really understanding, and he was kind of like, okay, well, we'll help you do this.
That's great.
And my mom also was supportive, but she was in tears.
Yeah.
And I was like, guys, let's just see.
Yeah.
And then I started doing more writing classes and focused on and I stopped doing the pre-med, and that was a huge relief.
Yeah, I bet. I remember when I graduated from the workshop, my parents came and my brothers and my dad, we were driving back from like wherever the graduation, and he was like, so what's the plan? And I was like, well, Cole Swinson was a bartender for 10 years while she wrote. And my dad was like,
Wrong answer.
you need health insurance. He was like, it comes down to health insurance.
Yeah.
And I was pissed that they even asked.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I run a summer writing program for high school students, and so many of the students who come to the program are looking ahead, sort of in their college years, and they're looking at that same kind of showdown, and they're they want to know how to manage it. Like this is kind of what I want to do, but I think I'm going to be pressured by my parents to do this. And how do I negotiate it? How do I go to college and study writing while at the same time satisfying this need that I feel obligated to do for my parents to sort of do something more practical? And it's a huge concern. I think
It is.
students really, really worry about it. And so, it's nice to hear that it's nice to hear a story where you kind of just came out with it and it went pretty well, all things
It went well.
considered.
It was, I still get grief.
Oh, no, you
Yeah. No, my folks are still kind of like, well, look at Prashant. He became an anesthesiologist. And I'm like, I
like,
have
have you
the
ever
same effect on people as an anesthesiologist.
Yeah,
I
it's
just,
true.
I have better hours.
Yeah,
less
I
pay.
remember seeing some movie. I think it was a documentary about Woody Allen traveling around the world, and there's a scene where he's with his parents, and he's like been presented with the key to the city of Venice, and it's the end of his career, and his dad, he's at the table, and his dad just says, "You should have been a pharmacist," or whatever it is, it's something like that. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking
Yeah,
to see
yeah.
it.
My dad
Maybe he should have been a
constantly
pharmacist.
called called the writer's workshop the reader's workshop. He'd be like, so I told my friend you're in the reader's workshop, and they hadn't heard of it. And I was like, yeah, they haven't heard of the reader's workshop.
Of course they haven't.
yet."
Great.
Well, speaking of the reader's workshop, so between your switch in majors and starting to write, and eventually you will go to the writer's workshop, but between then, I believe you wrote
Oh,
these
yeah, it was-
poems that are sitting in front of you.
Oh yeah.
So can you set us up a little bit? When did you write what you're about to read? What do you remember about that time, or what you were thinking about? Anything you can share with us before we read them?
Yeah. So I was writing in college, oftentimes in like a creative writing class. That first teacher was Lucy Brock-Broido, but then I had some other really amazing teachers like Henri Cole and Louise Glick came and taught. That was wild. I used to drive her to the grocery store
That's the best.
in my car that we painted a lightning bolt on the side of it.
Wait, what color was
You-
the car?
you-
And what color was the lightning bolt?
You and who painted it?
It was my so that was I shared that car we purchased for $500. It was a old Chevy, like Impala, that was painted black, and we painted a yellow lightning
So
bolt
cool.
crudely on the driver's side door. And we had a really stupid kind of little lingo where we were convinced that we were going to make the word touch into a kind of like part of like, you know, the slang of our generation. So anything was cool, it was touch.
Oh,
Let's start it now.
I like it.
Yeah. So I'm going to read some touch poems.
Yeah.
Right.
I tried to get the word brill going. I asked.
Is that a word?
I asked Magnus, a 14-year-old. I was like, "Is brill a word?" And he texted back, "Please stop."
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
But we wanted to get a license plate, personalized license plate for the car, and we wanted touch on our Lightning mobile.
Having Louise Glick in the car was not enough.
She she looked it up and down, and it was a very Louise Glick moment when she got in.
You got the license plate. You did.
Well, touch was taken.
yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So we got touch too.
Oh, love it.
Right.
Love it.
All right. Okay.
This whole time, though, I've been waiting for you to tell me, because I've been asking, like, who did you paint it with? I thought you were going to tell me that you painted the lightning bolt with Louise Gluck.
Oh yeah.
And I
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
that would have made the story.
That would have been amazing. No, she just kind of raised an eyebrow at the crudely drawn lightning bolt, but she was it was wild being in classes with all these poets, and I took a workshop with Seamus Heaney too. So that's around when these poems kind of happen.
And so Seamus wasn't like a one-day visitor. It was like you had a semester with Seamus?
Yeah. I mean, he is a great poet and an unforgettable teacher, but he didn't get like up in your stuff that much.
Yeah.
You know, he had other things going on. It was
So
kind of more like benign neglect.
You didn't take him to the grocery store or anything,
I didn't take Seamus
To the grocery store.
in the
For-
Hornet.
for the
in
best.
but we got to have a drink with him at the end of the term. He took us all to the pub
And so these are written somewhere in that.
in that period. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so this first one is called 1,000 Cuts.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
And I remember like trying to figure out if I should like type out the word.
It's a great question.
1,000 or
What did you
but
go
it's-
with?
I went numerical with a comma after the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We shot lepers at dawn, shuffling with tin bells that clanked a warning of approach. 11 heads hooded and bowed in documentary fashion. They provided counterpoint to my voiceover. Many were lost on the floor of a Bombay editing room. The rest, I imagine, saved for the festivals.
Yeah.
It's,
Whatever.
yeah.
Why even do it?
It's just
They're
so.
always so
It's amazing.
good.
They are so good. So when you.
I have some bad ones here.
You
Well,
do.
okay, but so here's.
That one was good.
Yeah, here's a question. When you see that now,
Yeah.
are you, I mean, I think any of us, you see something you wrote in the past and you sort of cringe and then whatever, but reading it, hearing it now, it sounds amazing to me. What do you feel? Like, are there things in there where you're like, oh, that's actually pretty cool?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I feel a little embarrassed at, because I feel like I'm like totally like doing the Indian, travel witness kind of thing, right? And I'd been in India the summer before with my family, sulking in the back seat of the ambassador car while they're driving, like, endlessly. And I'm just like reading, like, so random what you read when you're in the backseat of the car with your parents. I was reading Sophie's Choice, the William Styron novel.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Long.
Yeah.
Long.
Wait, and so what
great
year
novel.
was this?
That was probably the summer after my senior year of high school.
But like what year?
No, summer after my sophomore year. I went to India with my parents, yeah.
So like in human time, what year?
So
World
in
historic.
Anno Domini.
World historical time. Yeah. Yeah.
That must have been 91.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow, okay.
And I remember I saw a boulder on the side of the road. We're driving through like the south of India, the state of Andhra Pradesh, which is very arid and long stretches of road. And we're going to Hyderabad to visit some family. And I saw a boulder that had a kind of spray painted on or painted on it. Leprosy is curable. And I remember kind of feeling like, holy crap, wow, like there's leprosy. I thought that was like from the Bible. And also it's like, why are you writing that in English to people who don't read that? Like, it was just a really strange mystery and a sad one.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where kind of that poem came from, But then I guess I imagined myself as a documentary filmmaker. Like I had to, do some kind of grandiose fantasy of,
Right. I mean, we have to like write. You weren't old enough yet to have.
I'm glad I didn't try to speak in the voice of a leper. Like it could have been a lot worse. But I think I see a kind of self-romanticization as like someone who is like the world-weary documentary filmmaker.
Yeah, but you gotta do that. It's the step we all have to take. I mean, no one. You're not gonna skip that step. I don't think anyone can. Right? You need that hubris to get to the next level.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to me. They're just. Not to say that you haven't advanced as a writer, but there is something in the voice here and in the narrative structure, at least within this particular poem, that reminds me a lot of elements of your first book in terms of this observational speaker, documentarian or not, that is sort of in a place that they are trying to think through what those surroundings are and how they relate both to the self and this sort of globally. And it relates to sort of travel. And it seems like those thoughts were circling around your head have been circling around your head maybe for a long time.
Yeah. Feeling like, I think there's a kind of feeling helpless before kind of some mysteries. That I think is there in this poem that I do feel still kind of like animates a lot of, what brings me to write. And I hadn't thought of that, and I wouldn't think of that. And I also think like I tried out a lot of, and probably one reason why this made it out of the shoebox of shame,
I love it.
is because I did see something, that I connected to. And I've got stuff that I totally don't feel any connection to at all. And I think that one thing I learned by going through the shoebox of shame was that it's definitely not a linear journey.
Interesting.
There are places where I was like, I was really lost.
My poetry got so bad when I got in the workshop because everyone else's poetry was inspiring mine. So every poem that I was handing in was like, oh, this is a Ben Gawker style, or oh, this is a Danny style. Like I lost any sense of what my style was, and for even years.
But that Danny style one was awesome.
Yeah.
Danny style one was.
So how do you think you got lost? Like what was happening to you in those periods?
Okay, so I've got like the perfect poem.
Oh, all right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is the last in here because this is one I wrote in the workshop when I was lost and I was doing, Ben Dollar style and Matt Miller style and, trying to,
So just for clarity, are these other poets in the workshop
Yeah.
or okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And you guys were here at the same time?
I
We
was here
overlapped
as
by a year.
But I was here as an undergrad.
Yeah, I remember.
Yep. And Dan Beachyquick was one
Yeah.
of my teachers, and Robin Schiff. And
Yeah.
so I knew you, but
Yeah.
I didn't have you as an
I remember.
instructor. But I knew all of those names too.
Yeah.
And you guys were all in battle with each other. It seemed like.
Well, I was just like ducking and like watching,
Well, I remember that you and Dan Beachyquick were in battle over squash and Scrabble.
That's true.
Interesting.
If battle is like being totally dominated by another human being.
I don't know. It seemed even to me.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
you were.
I wouldn't want to play either one of you in Scrabble for sure.
Or squash.
There's no competition,
Really?
Including in podcasting. Because I listened to Dan's podcast and I was like, oh my god, I can't do this now.
No, it's all right.
It's so beautiful.
We'll delete his. What?
Yeah, good. Yeah, nobody listened to Dan's
it's just all us.
podcast.
Okay,
Okay, I've
you-
got my response to that problem, right? Because like I'm in my second year at the workshop and I still can't find my way to who I want to be as a writer, and so I wrote Game of Death. Hi. Prepare to defend yourself. My name is Srikanth Reddy. Your monkey technique is good, very good, but I'll show you real dragon kung fu. Nice kick. Now take that and that. Slowly, the human face appears through the speculative tradition in verse. You fought well, master.
You know what I hear in that is you're funny. Like you're a very funny person, I feel like. And you're writing this sort of comedic stuff when you're in high school.
That's true. That's
I mean, I just read your first collection this morning, and I've heard you read. And so Underworld Lit. I've heard you read a little bit of that. I mean, it's very sort of beautiful and probing and exploratory and existential, but it's also very funny, in places. And do you feel like at this point you're just sort of trying to figure out how to balance that deep documentary, exploratory, serious part of yourself with obviously this other sort of part of yourself that is a little bit lighter, a little bit funnier?
Just a total jackass. Yeah.
I mean, do you think that's part of what's happening, or that's just like a slapdash diagnosis? But like,
yeah. Like I think one thing, like that poem felt kind of good to write.
yeah. You had to write it.
Yeah, and like at the Foxhead later that night, like people were kind of like, "Oh, that was totally funny," but that was just jackassing around.
Right.
But I mean, it's great that you have a place to put jackass on the paper and not get in trouble and try it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I think that poem that you just read, if that wasn't written, some of these wouldn't have.
I don't know. I feel like there's a little bit of that flippant, very funny part of yourself that maybe was turned up to 12 on this.
Yeah, and but I thought of it because you were talking about like trying on different styles, and there's like kind of like and there's a way in which I was also like super into martial arts when I was a kid as a spectator, and there's this like kind of like movie trope of the pupil who has to learn the different styles of like dragon style or mantis style, and there's a little bit of that when you're in writing school too with different teachers and you try and learn mantis style.
Mantis style is the most popular one.
Yeah, because you get to like eat your mate's head.
It's interesting also that you said you turned this poem in for workshop and then you like went to the Foxhead and people were like, "Whoa, that poem's totally great."
They weren't like it's totally great.
Well,
They're like,
I guess
that was
what I mean
a
is, like, I felt like I had a moment in the workshop where I was also floundering and trying to figure my voice out, and at one point I didn't have anything to turn in for workshop, so I turned in an email that I had written.
Wow.
And I feel like that was the one where suddenly everybody was like, oh, that poem you turned in, like it was really different. Like they were
Yeah.
saying things that maybe it had humor in it. And it was the one where I was like, well, wait a minute. That was the one.
Doing here.
Yeah. And it made me start thinking about maybe the ways in which I was trying to emulate what I thought was a good poem. And when I had kind of gotten that out of my head and I was just writing, it seemed in some way connect to an audience in a different way. And so I spent time after that thinking, I don't know, I guess what I'm getting at is after writing this, do you feel, and looking at it now, do you feel like it did shift maybe what you thought was possible for yourself as a writer?
I think it felt like cathartic. I think it felt like when you're starting out as a writer, what's the Blake quote? Better strangle an infant in the crib than nurse unacted upon desires.
Oh, yeah, that
from the Marriage of Heaven and Hell, is
that
it?
very
Or-
popular quote we all know.
Yeah.
The one that I will never forget.
Yeah, it's like you can't unhear that, But I think that in writing school, that is actually like a proverb that you should kind of listen to, and so I was thrown a lot at the wall, and I didn't have a sense of a center as a writer, and I was having a lot of fun. And I was meeting people who were coming from a place that felt like a real place, and feeling kind of crappy also about not feeling like I had that place, or the place that I had, which was maybe writing about India or about those questions we were talking about earlier, wasn't. I felt like maybe I wanted to disown it. It wasn't the most exciting place that I saw poetry coming from. So I think that this was part of, just trying something, and that is a good thing to do. I mean, there's more embarrassing ones.
But it's like there's a courage there too that I think that I've seen in a lot of our interviews where there is like a type of moxie to try these things, and I think you have to have that to get over the hump of being self-aware or not knowing what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like, did you feel at any point like I am a writer, or did you feel like I'm pretending to be a writer?
I felt like I was pretending the whole time that I was, in school.
Do you feel like a writer now?
I don't know. Not yet. I don't think so.
Any day now.
But if you went back to yourself, right, in elementary school, writing the Abraham Lincoln poem, a classic, and introduced yourself now, I mean, you could say, like, we're doing it. We are a writer now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would feel like I got the elbow patches and the bike,
Yes.
More than that, I think.
But, I mean, I think every time I sit down to write something, I feel totally haunted by, is this real? Is this really poetry? And I see it happening all around me, and I love it when I see it. And I see little moments of it in things I've written, but I also see where, like, I feel like I'm kind of faking it till I make it to get to those places in the writing too. And sometimes I feel like when I look at my first book, I feel like, oh, I like that the most,
Yeah, that's so weird too. I'll look back at stuff and be like, you were better then.
Yeah. But it's like kind of comforting too, in a nice way.
Chigu, since you're here in Iowa City, and since we were referencing this a little bit, so you're at Harvard as an undergrad, you then come to Iowa City to get your MFA.
Yeah.
What was your time in Iowa like?
It was amazing. I still one of the things I like about living in Chicago now is that I can come to Iowa City sometimes and see friends and be and just touch ground, because it's still really a place where people can be creative together. And that's really rare. And there's all kinds of things that are hard about it, and all kinds of things that are, I can understand why you could feel trapped sometimes in the intensities of this place, but it's also like, it's really unique. And since I left Iowa, I've visited like different like writing communities and different artistic and different schools and places, but I always keep coming back to this place, and I think it's that it's a place that brings people together, and some people stay and keep building, and some people come and go, and it's always being re-fed by young people coming through. And I think they probably keep you guys look pretty young, like it keeps you on your toes if you live here.
It's like
So I'm curious, Chiku. So when I was listening to this interview with you, which took place a couple of years ago, I think in 2020, you were talking about how, I think what you were saying is that when you're writing now, you're not writing short lyric poems. At the time, you're saying you were doing something different. And so I'm curious now, like when you sit down to write, what's sort of happening now? Is there any particular project or sort of
what's
direction
next?
you're going in? Is there something that you're particularly focused on or obsessed with? Or this is usually Danny's question, but I'm stealing it. Yeah.
So I have started to finally maybe try and come to terms with the running away from the problem of writing about my parents and my culture, that I like desperately didn't want to get boxed into as a high school student or a college student or even as a young writer. And then, now I feel like looking back at that poem, about the lepers and remembering that stuff, I do realize it's been there somewhere for a long time. And now I'm thinking about writing a long kind of adaptation of the Indian epic, which is called the Mahabharata. There are two great Indian epics. One is called the Ramayana, and one is called the Mahabharata. And the Mahabharata is the longer of the two. It's kind of like the Iliad and like Ovid's Metamorphoses kind of put together. It's got a lot of stories and a lot of mythology, and it's got like a giant war in the middle of it. And there's no version in English that readers go to that isn't like kind of semi-scholarly, or there is a version by a British poet named Carol Satyamurthy that is the closest. But I wanna kind of like go back there, because those are the stories that like I did kind of grow up on.
So do you mean you would like to translate it or sort of write another version of it, or how do you envision?
I think, so there are translation projects at like, the Clay Sanskrit Library at Columbia University and the University of Chicago has like teams of like distinguished Sanskritists who are trying to translate the whole thing, kind of literary English. They keep like dying or retiring, or, it's just such a long poem. It's like 8 times the length of the Iliad and the Odyssey put together.
Okay.
So no way am I going to translate it. But I want to adapt it,
Right,
and probably like, I'll have to leave a lot out, but
we should do a
amazing.
comic book.
there is a comic
Is there
book.
a graphic novel
That
about
was
it?
how I came to
all
it,
right.
is these comic books that were produced in India called Amar Chitrakatha that tell all of these stories. And so my uncles would bring those comic books over from India in their suitcases along with saris for my mother, or mango pickle that would break and then spill all over the comics. And
We had pickled mango. It's also an Iraqi
Really?
food.
I didn't know that.
They would ship it to us. And so when I was growing up, I was so embarrassed of it's such a fragrant smell.
Yeah, it really is.
And so whenever my dad would open it, I would be so embarrassed of, you were talking earlier about sort of looking different or sounding different, and my family spoke a different language. And so just like the pickled mango is like a thing that I was so embarrassed about, and I still like am haunted by it. And yet
Do you like it?
I don't eat. I like have an aversion to it because of the embarrassment it gives me.
Yeah.
But like all of my friends in high school
Love it.
thought it was so cool,
Yeah.
and love it, and like my wife loves it, and it's one of those things that the minute you say it, I have like these visceral memories of the jar in the fridge
Oh, no.
and wanting to like hide it.
You got to do an episode where Danny just eats The mango
Well,
pickle.
we're gonna
We
do
like
that.
do
We're gonna
immersion
we're gonna
therapy
do
with
that.
it.
We're gonna do the Danny episode one of these days.
I had one sort of final question I wanted to ask, which may take us in a different direction, and we can cut it if we want. But you were talking earlier, way at the beginning of this, about language, and I was just curious, what is the native tongue of your parents?
They speak a minor language spoken by only about 60 or 70 million people worldwide, called Telugu.
Okay, and did they speak it to you and your sister growing up?
Not really. They were of a generation that thought that if you spoke your native language, that it would interfere with your kids learning English. Did you have that same?
Exact same thing
Yeah.
with my parents. And so I'm curious because you also talked about you were focused on sort of mastering this language, which clearly maybe they didn't have for a variety of reasons. So now, as you've sort of grown up, are you interested in that language? Like, are you trying to connect to it in different ways?
Yeah. So I think that's an interesting thing about becoming a poet too, or like becoming interested in a language in a really crazily intense way when you're little is my parents and your parents probably too used their language as a secret language.
100%.
And
Oh,
so when they
man.
didn't want you to understand what they were talking about, when they were quarreling or, talking about you, they would switch.
Yep.
And you would listen really carefully, and you could maybe learn a little bit, but not enough.
The thing that I often tell people, so my dad, his first language is Arabic,
Yeah.
and he and my mother met in Israel, and so they speak Hebrew. That's kind of how they communicate often together. And so similar to what you're saying, ever we'd be around the family kitchen table and they want to switch into something, they would just start speaking Hebrew. But Arabic was even less something that I heard until we were talking with our extended family. So the reason I bring all this up is because while you could maybe think a little bit about how would you understand what's going on, you can always tell when someone's angry, no matter what language
This
they're
is
in.
true.
Right.
So when they switched into Hebrew or Arabic, I could start to tell when somebody was upset. Then I realized I have no idea the word. I'm just like watching their face or their, hand gestures.
Yeah.
Well, it's like Robert Frost says about the sound of sense, that you can hear, if you read a poem and you listen to the sound of it, sense has a sound, and you can hear it through a closed door, and you can hear the sound of the sense even when you can't hear the words, right? One thing I learned, and so I started to study it a little bit in graduate school, and I went to India and I spent 7 weeks living in like a business traveler's hotel that my uncle owned, taking language classes at the University of Andhra, and I learned enough that I could travel backpack around a little bit. But I also learned that, my parents are foul-mouthed.
Yeah.
That's
Love it.
Yeah.
right.
So with all that, the very last thing I was going to ask is just, so then do they read your work now?
Just enough to, figure out that, I smoke. Yeah. But they're like, my father has never read a novel.
In English or
in
just
any
a novel?
language. Yeah. And I learned that about him recently. For him, literature was never a thing growing up in his village. And then, and so it's another world that I live in from them. And I'm grateful to them for letting me go,
Are they proud of you now? Do you catch them bragging after they were so worried about you becoming the guy with the patches on the bike?
Do they know what the Paris Review is?
Have they heard of it?
They don't really. They're like, oh, this is that's that magazine. Is it in Paris? Yeah.
Go to Paris.
They've never looked through the magazine. No. But it's great to. There's also freedom of them not reading what I write or glancing at it a little bit or just and I dedicate my books to them and and I'm glad that they don't read every word and that they're not like criticizing my poetry or feeling hurt by it, or I think they're just glad that that I make a living.
Right on.
Yeah, for sure. Chiku, thank you so much.
Support for this podcast comes from the University of Iowa, the Magid Center for Writing, the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and the Graduate College. We'd like to thank the Center for Language and Culture Learning for use of their podcast studio. Sad Me of the Past is part of the Writing University Podcast Network at the University of Iowa. This network includes podcasts from creative writing programs and departments all across our campus. Visit writinguniversity.org/podcasts to see our full list of offerings, including Writing Matters, The 11th Hour, Origins, The Short Coat, and more.
Why are you playing the drums?
Because I was going to do a commercial.
Oh. What was your commercial?
Hi, listeners. We know that you're a fan of this podcast, but did you know that we have other podcasts on the Writing University Podcast Network? They include the Summer Writing Festival podcast, Writing Matters, and
I gotta tell you, if I was listening to this, I would not.
We're burning time.
I would not want to listen to those podcasts.
Yeah, let's
They don't good.
Let's get back into it.
okay.
You have a whole podcast ecology.
I
guess
do,
you
I
could
do.
call it.